Hello everybody. Happy Thanksgiving for those of you in the US, and for all of us, I just want to give incredible thanks for being such a wonderful, marvelous even, community. I've been really blessed to be able to do YouTube for the past 4 or 5 years and watched it grow so wonderfully with everybody getting together and being positive and helping each other. The comments and questions we get are second to none. So thank you everybody that's been involved. We'd like to give you a free multi-track of a band called The Gallery. The song is called White Noise Town. This is from our Produce Like a Pro Academy, which each month we give away a free multi-track. And in fact, there's tons more multi-tracks than that available. There's a plus 40 plus of hours, maybe even more. Plus all the members give away multi-tracks as well to share with each other in there of all different levels of recording, every single genre, every production style, every mixing style you can think of. It's an incredible place. So please click the link to download. There is, of course, also a link to get a cheaper membership if you want to join at the moment. But most importantly, get the multi-tracks for free. And here's a little breakdown here talking about the recording process and how I mixed the song as well. We couldn't find the original mix, so we just remixed it. So I actually believe we may have beaten the mix. There's a couple of things, automation things that we could do a little extra here and there, but I think we beat the mix. We made the intro a little bit more dramatic than it was before. So why don't you have a quick listen? It's got a fun kind of intro, and then it goes into a pretty slamming, I wouldn't say roots rock, like rock, alternative rock track.
Tattoos and scraped knees. I'm lost in a dream. Can anybody out there hear my screams? 'Cause I've been yelling at the top of my lungs. Now I'm shooting out my loudest guns. If you could only hear the sound in this white noise town. My father's name, my mother's eyes, but we don't see the same. Yeah, what the want ain't what I need. Can anybody out there hear my screams? 'Cause I've been yelling at the top of my lungs. Now I'm shooting out my loudest guns. If you could only hear the sound in this white noise town. In this white noise town. No one hears you.
Complete with buzzy guitar sound at the end. So I really like that. You're going to be able to have the Spotify, and you're going to have this latest mix. You're going to have the original album mix from 2013. Now I remember doing this immediately after, not immediately, yeah, it was immediately after. What am I talking about? After finishing Aerosmith, because that finished the end of 2012. This was like the beginning of 2013. So I did a lot of fun things when I recorded this. I'm using DIs that you can see on here. We'll obviously give you these tracks consolidated. And they'll be labeled properly and everything. I think actually they are pretty labeled. But anyway, but I was doing things like double miking stuff. So I've got here, for instance, What that is that is on the bottom there, you just heard a 57, SM57. On the top, it's the Delta, it's the Sontronics Delta, which I still use occasionally, not as much as I used to. But you can hear the difference in the mic. I know a lot of you are always asking about ribbons and dynamics and stuff. Well, this is a ribbon, this is a Delta ribbon. You can hear and you can see, if you want to look at the wave file, that it's fat with a capital PH. I mean, that's the thing about the ribbon. It's got a lot of low end, a lot of low mids. I really like it. And the 57 is just a little bit brighter. I believe that this was an Egnator amp. And that's a stereo part. So there was a lot of fun things. We were using my gold top Les Paul that I used to have. We were doing some Telecaster stuff as well. It was a good combination of guitars. They had a really good rhythm guitar player in the singer. The singer was a great rhythm guitar player, but they also had this new guy, Ben, who was a pretty tasty lead guitarist. He was not from where they are. The whole band came from Massachusetts. They came from just outside Boston. So they actually played a show in Boston while I was working with Aerosmith, and a couple of guys from the band, Tom and Brad, both came down. That's Brad Whitford and, of course, Tom Hamilton, came down and we checked out the band. It was quite fun to bring a couple of Aerosmith guys down to see a band you're working with. Everybody got a big kick out of it. So that was fun. Anyway, so we can go through this. A lot of it is stuff that you're used to with me. What I've done is I've created a combination of all those samples. So have a listen to the kick. What's kind of fun about that is you could steal that and just use it on its own. That's a pretty tasty kick sample because it's a combination of lots of different samples that I put together. And then the same thing with the snare. I actually took the gunshot, Dave Jordan gunshot snare, and blended it with a ton of other ones. One of the things I blended with it was the original snare sound that I used on the first album that I did, or first EP that I did with this band. So it's kind of, well, you'll hear it. It's kind of aggressive and also a lot of room tone on it. So it's a pretty good blend. I mean, those two together, it's quite rocking. If it won't stop crashing. Those two together is pretty rocking. Amazing, it plays perfectly all right when I play the whole thing, and now just solo something and it won't work. So pretty cool samples you can use because there's a blend of all my samples in a way I want to hear them. So feel free to use them. I rolled off a little bit of low end because it was pretty excessive. On the kick there, I've got 34 just rolled off. I've got a bit of a 110 cut so the bass can breathe over it. And then the snare, I took about 100 down and I boosted some pretty high stuff up here just to kind of make it a little brighter. But overall, the drum sounds pretty massive. It's my old studio, so it's a big drum room. One of the tricks I've done on the far rooms is to put verb on it. So we'll have a listen. Here's the whole drum kit. You hear the snare sample fairly predominant when you solo it like that, but once you start putting in other instruments, it gets eaten up pretty quickly, particularly by this bass, because I recorded a distorted bass tone and then it was actually printed through a SansAmp, and then I went and overdid it again and put a SansAmp plug in it. I used one of the SansAmp DIs, you know, that has you know, distortion, everything built into it. It's pretty tasty. I'm sure many of you still use them. They're really, really good. So between that and the DI, I got this. Bass player is great. I am also, quite importantly, running a gate on that growler. It's the growler bass. It's the Gibson bass. It was a great bass. I wish I bought that off him. Here's the acoustic. What is interesting about that acoustic, you can tell, is it's capoed, or capoed as Americans would say. It's capoed quite high up. So it's not a Nashville tuning, it's just different inversions. So it doesn't fight with these rhythm guitars here. Reflection, I'm very tempted to just mute those acoustics there. You can try that. I don't mind the distance in some ways. However, I think the vocal goes over the top of that, so maybe I should mute it. But anyway, so that's the basics of the rhythm track. With the acoustics here, what I did is and I haven't used this recently on acoustic, but it's really, really nice, is using the Mac DSP analog channel. Now, this is the older version of it, but it's really nice to just smooth out the acoustics. Interesting dissonance. And EQ, rolling off, you know, 140 here, quite aggressively, boosting some high end. And that's just to get it out of the way of the bass, out of the way of the kick, out of the way of some, you know, because the electrics have got some roll off as well. I'm actually boosting low end on the electrics here, actually, on the 57. Have a listen. Take that off. Nice. Because they're small, tight inversions, there's no low strings in there, just the mix is very much about the production, because I'm trying to keep inversions super, super tight, so that when the chorus hits, there's somewhere for it to go. You see, that's the chorus, but these additional guitars come in as well. I mean, I'll be honest, I absolutely love guitar production. It's one of my favorite things, is to get stuck in there and work on the parts. You know, it's like if I grab an acoustic, it's finding like different, you know, what are we in? You know, finding tight areas. Like quite often I'll only use 3 notes of the chord, the D, the G, and the B string. You know, or maybe sometimes I'll capo it, so I get, but I like to get tight inversions, because then what can happen is you can orchestrate it really nicely. You can go, well, here, you can have this on a low C. You could have the G down there. And then when you play a C on a bass, it's only sitting directly below that, and it gives a really tough chord, because now the C is going to be on the bass guitar. I love these kind of ideas and inversions. And then I might build around here, and so if I wanted to play a melody, I could go, it's just like a, you see what I mean? It's like orchestrating guitars is one of my favorite things to do. And Eric's come to get the guitar, thank you. So Pay attention to that when you're coming to mix it. You can sculpt these guitars so they fit around, and you can get a little bit more scientific with it if you like. You can kind of boost some low mids and then find areas for them to sort of sit within each other. But that's what I was going for. So once you put the bass and everything in, you get... Remember the song The Young and Restless? This is another one of those songs, the same band. You know, I had fun working with them on this, really did. So that, and we've still got the lead guitar itself to go over the top of that. Other Marshall part here. So for me, this works because everything is, you know, the guitar productions, everything is fitting around each other. To me, it's more about talking about the production of this than it is even really the mix, because a lot of this stuff is barely, you know, EQ'd. What's happening is it's recorded that way. You should find if you bring this up inside of your session, if you balance these elements, they will get really, really close. And with those samples I've printed, you should be able to get a pretty big drum sound. The only thing I will say is that the snare on this track got a bit worn. So if we go back a little bit, the live snare itself is a bit, it's a bit dead. It's not the best snare, which is why the sample became a little bit more prevalent. Now, don't get me wrong, I think you could probably get a good snare out of it, but here's the reality. It's like a boof. It's actually not a million miles away from what it should be, but you throw in the sample and you can see how much work the sample's doing. The sample could actually come back. Should reprint the mix, Eric, afterwards. Yeah, okay, so the sample actually I've come back now. It should be even better. Oops. Should be better polarity now. Now, there's a lot of body in the sample as well. It's got body and it's got the high end, and of course it's got the verb. But, you know, you can mess around with it. You don't have to use as much of the sample. As like I said, that's a combination of all the different samples I had, including, as I said earlier, the sample of the snare from the original session we did. It's a really good band. This is one of those bands that I had a lot of love for. You know, we really got stuck in here, really did a lot of great production stuff with. And it's just a shame that, you know, in 2013, this was not hip. This was not a hip band whatsoever. You know, the rock that was coming out at that time, nothing was like this. And you know, they had a Tom Petty thing. And, you know, they had some great songs. That song, that Dream song that I wrote with the singer, you've mixed that. I mean, that's a wonderful one. Young and Restless is obviously a big song. These were great songs, but it was at a time when this was not de rigueur. This was not hip music to like, which is a real shame. I think if they had come along 10 years earlier, it probably would have been a lot better. They needed to be around about Counting Crows, you know, that period, maybe the Phrase first album, if we could have put some piano in it, you know. It's just one of those things. This is the reality. Bunch of 24, 25-year-old kids, perfect age, great band. Two of them were brothers. The singer and the drummer are brothers. The bass player and the original guitar player all came from the same town. I mean, it's a dream. It's what you want, a band that comes to LA to make a record. I mean, it just was fantastic, but it just was not the right time for them, which is a really big shame. They also were huge Oasis fans as well, so you can probably hear a little bit of that mixed in with the Tom Petty. So the other things to really point out, apart from the guitars, is there is a really nice Hammond in it. And I've got an untreated Hammond track here. You see I've got a spread going on. We talk about this as well quite often. I will use spreaders, I'll use MS techniques as long as it's only on instruments within a track. I can't put it on the full mix. You know, we were just with Leapwing Audio, for instance, a couple of nights ago, and they came here and we tested out the new Dyne 1.3. You're going to love it. And if you already own the Dyne 1, it's a free upgrade. If not, I strongly suggest you do it. You get it because they're taking the Center One technology and putting it in there as well. And it's just, it works so well. It works so well. The way they can control the sides and the center independently. It's really, really smart. They've done a wonderful job. But they don't use MS, so they don't have that phasiness. Okay, the vocal.
Bring me back to the days of temporary tattoos and scraped knees. I'm lost in a dream. Can anybody out there hear my screams? 'Cause I've been yelling at the top of my lungs. Now I'm shooting out my loudest guns. If you could only hear a sound in this white noise town.
So as you can tell, I'm using a lot of my usual tricks. I have the distorted Echoplex, which is a tape print, which adds some grit to it. I've also got, on my vocal bus there, I've got a de-esser, and I'm running into an EQ, which is just rolling off the low end. Then I'm applying a little bit more gentle compression. Then I've got another RVox to really grab him, and then a little bit, lot more low roll-off, and a little bit more high-end, of course, going into another de-esser. So I'm brightening the vocal, getting rid of some of the low end, and at the same time, compressing it. I've got a low octave running that you know that trick I love to do. Here it is.
Bring me back to the days.
Super low in the mix, super, super low, but it is there. There's also a distortion as well, which is just a lo-fi. I went a little crazy on it. I don't know if you need to, but I got a de-esser going into an RVox, going into an REQ4 to brighten it before going into a de-esser, then a lo-fi. So I know it's pretty crazy. So I think ultimately you could do. I want it to be distorted and I want it to be bright, but I don't want it to be completely out of control. You could probably use multiband compressors or dynamic EQs to control it as well. This is going to be a fun one for you all to mix. The reverb, I've got MV2, and I've got the Eventide reverb.
Bring me back to the days of temporary tattoos and scraped knees. I'm lost in a dream. Can anybody out there hear my screams? 'Cause I've been yelling at the top of my lungs. Now I'm shooting out my loudest guns. If you could only hear a sound in this white noise town.
Now that was the bass player who unfortunately quit a little bit after the end of this record, but he was a great background singer, and it was just added a whole different dimension. And then there's a gang vocal here.
Noise town. In this white noise town. No one hears her.
There's a lot of not very much going on. It's interesting. There's a ton of multi-effects there, but they're all really quiet. It's quite interesting. I've got a flanger. I've got an echo boy. The flanger's on the reverb, the crystallizer, but it's not doing that much. I think I was just trying to randomize it a little bit because they were like, oh, and it's just a little boring, and I just wanted to wreck it a little bit, destroy it. And so a reverb with a meta flanger, an echo boy, and a deverb. You know, you'll find your own idea of what you want to do there, I'm sure. Now, there's an overlap lead vocal that you heard when I played it back. Here it is.
In this white noise town, bring me back to the days, the temporary tattoos and scraped knees.
I think the only other thing to mention on the vocal is that there's a delay throw that's actually printed. So that's what this track is. Have a listen.
Out as guns, if you could only hear a sound.
And that is trashed out, as you can see. It's compressed, and then it has the saturation from the Sans amp. Then it's going for a verb, and it's got our old friend, the analog channel, compressing it, and then some EQ, just adding some high lift. It's really gentle, but you know, you can. I built this, so you'll definitely have it. You can do whatever you like with it.
Out as guns, if you could only hear a sound. In this white noise town, bring me back to the day.
Yeah, I really enjoyed making this record. Like I said, it's so sad that this just was not their time.
Tattoos and scraped knees. Bring me back to the days, the temporary tattoos and scraped knees.
Now the do-do-do-do-do, I mean, you could do a mix without that in at the end.
Bring me back to the days, the temporary tattoos and scraped knees.
It's pretty cool. Like I said, very creative band and a lot of fun to do guitar production stuff with. So hopefully from this one, you're going to learn a lot about guitar production. So then the last thing I want to cover is the intro. Now we've sort of gone through this. Let's have a listen to the intro here. So that was kind of fun. There is actually a little bit more to it because we had this guitar and he was like hitting the pickups and go beep, beep. And so, you know, hit the string against the pickup itself and it made this beep sound and then it went through the delay and we recorded it. So this is what we got. And that is the drum intro that was going on there. But instead of like obviously printing it as a full drums, I made that little tiny kit out of it. And that's more exaggerated here. The dramatic side between the, the chiaroscuro, the light and the shade here is so much bigger than it is on the version you're going to hear on Spotify. But I kind of like it.
Tattoos and scraped knees. I'm lost in a dream. Can anybody out there hear my screams? 'Cause I've been yelling at the top of my lungs. Now I'm shooting out my loudest guns. If you could only hear the sound in this white noise town. My father's name, my mother's eyes, but we don't see the same. Yeah, with the wall.
Okay, another thing to mention while here is just these little tiny moments that I added. Just those little rolls. Sometimes I felt like they weren't being picked up properly, either in a sample or in the live snare itself, so they're just duplicated. And the only thing that's really going on about them is I've got I've hit the input a little harder here, and I'm using this 1176 plugin, the Bomb Factory one. So just watch out for those two moments. If you see a track that doesn't look like it has much on it, we can call that, I'll name them now so that when Eric comes to do it, he'll know what to call them.
You mean instead of audio 1 and audio 2?
You're funny. So hopefully that all makes sense. I'm very excited to hear the mixes on this song. What I love about the Academy is that you're all really good at helping each other. So I'm going to sort of let this one be. You're going to have a print of this. We moved the snare ever so slightly, so Eric's going to reprint it. But apart from that, you're going to have this, and it's not as hot as the one that's on Spotify because that was mastered. I think I mastered that. So I don't think they had the budget to master it with somebody, so I mastered it myself. In retrospect, I wish I'd had the budget to master it with somebody as amazing as Adam Ayan, but you live and you learn. I think I prefer the new mix. There's probably some things I could tweak from it still, but I think I prefer it. The first album I mixed, I did entirely on an 8058 on a Neve. This one I did on the SSL. Part of me prefers the first album sonically overall with the Neve. I think it was more in keeping with them. That was called Come Alive. So if you want to check that out, see what you think about that sonically compared with, it just seemed to suit the band more. And I think in a perfect world, you have those choices. You either mix in a box, you mix hybrid, you mix on SSL, you mix on a Neve. I know that's quite silly in the modern world, but there can be quite a difference between consoles. So that's a good one to check out.
So I hope you enjoyed that. Have a marvelous Thanksgiving for those of you who are celebrating it. For everybody here, thank you ever so much for being so incredible. Please don't forget to click the link to download the Multitracks, and I'll speak to you all again very, very soon.